What I would like to do now is ask you, for those of you who can stand for a moment of silence. The reason Donna Marie McIntyre cannot come today is her husband, who's a postal worker, Mike McIntyre, he passed away last night. But we want people to stand not only for Mike, but for all the other postal workers we know who passed away in the past as well. So just for a moment of silence. Okay, thank you very much. So as people come to the head table, there are going to be representatives of three locals, Vancouver local, Fraser Valley West, and the Royal City local, and the regional office who've all assisted us, and this is Sister Colin Jones from the Fraser Valley West local. But I know what you're really here to hear about is what's happening to your pension, what's the information, and things like that. So I'm going to turn you over to Brother George Kumbon. George is our National Secretary Treasurer of CUPW, and he's also on the Pension Advisory Committee, and so he's the person who can give us the latest update. So without further ado, I'm going to turn you over to George.
Well, thanks very much, Sister Pollock, for that introduction. And I want to really extend a welcoming to all the sisters and brothers here, retirees. It's just it's amazing that we've been able to fill a hall like this. I wish our general membership meetings could be as well attended. And really, it's the sisters and brothers in this hall that have built this union. And so it is discouraging for me when I attend general membership meetings and not seeing this level of participation. And I really congratulate you for coming out today. And I hope that the information that I provide to you today is useful and provides a little bit more of the details and information than perhaps you've been receiving from Canada Post through the pension plan news that you receive in the mail. So the focus on today, though, is on the Canada Post registered pension plan. So anyone here that retired before October 1st, 2000, you are under the public service superannuation plan, and the information here really doesn't affect you at all. The public service superannuation is, while it is under attack by the current government in respect of the current plan members, we have heard nothing from the government about changes respecting the public service superannuation benefits that are being paid to retirees. However, the Canada Post registered pension plan that started on October 1st, 2000 is in a precarious situation, and I think the plan members, both the current members as well as retirees, need to have this information so that they can participate in whatever actions need to be taken in order to protect the interests of the current plan members as well as of the retirees. So it's clear that public sector pension plans are under attack, not only in the federal government, but in provincial and municipal plans across the country. And we always hear in the media about the gold-plated pension plans enjoyed by public servants and or by civil servants. And you know, based on the pension funds that you're receiving on a monthly basis, your pension plan is not gold-plated. It is a very good pension plan. It's an excellent pension plan. It's providing a very good return based on the contributions that were made while you were working, and the indexation part of the plan is very good, especially in comparison with other pension plans across the country, and especially in comparison with pension plans in the private sector. But to say that it's gold-plated is, I think, is a misnomer. But the way in which public sector pension plans, or public sector unions, including the CUPW, responds to these attacks will shape the future of public service pension plans. And so in this presentation, I'm going to focus on a number of things. First of all, what's the nature of the current pension problems, and how should CUPW engage in discussions to best protect the pension interests of the members and of the retirees. I'm going to talk a little bit about past private and public sector experiences that demonstrate the type of engagement that needs to be taken on going forward. And I'll also talk a little bit about the legal arguments that CUPW has available to it to best protect the plan of the members and of the retirees' interests. So while I'm going through the plan, however, I'm going to be using some terms and some pension plan terms. And if anyone is unclear as to what what some of these terms mean, please put up your hands so that I can provide further explanation, because some of it can get quite technical, and depending on, and I know that there's a wide variety of knowledge about pension plans in the room today. So right now, the Canada Post Pension Plan is severely underfunded on a solvency basis. And when I say a solvency basis, I mean that a pension plan is evaluated in two separate ways. They're evaluated on a going concern basis, which assumes that the pension plan is going to continue on and on and on forever, with new members coming in and members retiring. A solvency basis evaluation, however, assumes that the pension plan winds up on a particular day and has the obligations that have built up among the current plan members as well as among the retirees. And in that evaluation is a determination of how much money would be required to buy annuities from the insurance industry to provide the incomes, the pension income, to the retirees that are members of the plan, as well as meet the obligation that is built up among the current plan members. And it's the solvency evaluation that is the problem with the Canada Post Pension Plan right now. On a going concern basis, the Canada Post Pension Plan actually is in a surplus of some I think it's $83 million surplus in the going concern. But on a solvency basis, it's underfunded. There's close to a $6 billion deficit, which means that it's about 72% funded, which then translates out that if someone is receiving $1,000 a month in pension and the plan is wound up, there will only be enough money in the plan to pay $720 a month to that individual going forward. So, under the pension regulations, when a plan is in solvency deficit, the employer has, or the plan sponsor, has a certain period of time to make additional payments to bring the plan up to fully funded status. And under the current rules, pension plans have 5 years in which to fund up a solvency deficit. So if there's a $5 billion deficit, then the plan sponsor would have to make additional payments of $1 billion a year over the 5 years to eradicate that deficit. So in a very real sense, Canada Post is insolvent, because in order to satisfy its current solvency deficit, it needs to make payments in the realm of $1 billion a year. over the next 5 years, and it's highly improbable that the federal government will step in and make those payments on behalf of the pension plan members. Now, if the CUPW enters into discussions with Canada Post and ultimately with the federal government, there is more of a possibility that CUPW will be in the best position to protect the members and to preserve the most important elements of the pension plan. If we don't engage in those discussions, then it will be left up to Canada Post and the government to decide what the solutions will be, and that is very risky. We know that the federal government does not like postal workers. We've seen how they've reacted to us in the past, and we don't believe that Harper's current difficulties will change his spots at all. So we don't want to end up in a situation where a solution is imposed on us. Now, we're aware of the details of various arrangements made in a number of private and public sector negotiations at both the federal and provincial levels around other pension plans that ran into difficulties. And in these cases, the unions and the pension plan sponsors or the pension plans themselves engaged in negotiations, and those negotiations led to results that protected the pension interests of the union members and the retirees, and also maintained the pension plans as defined benefit pension plans. So, and that is a very important feature. So the first step in that process, though, has to be the development of a very comprehensive strategy about what are the most important features of the pension plan that need to be preserved. Is it the defined benefit aspect of the plan? Is it the early retirement benefits that we have in the Canada Post pension plan? The indexation of the plan? Is it survivor benefits? Those are the types of things that go into the evaluation of a plan that determines what the solvency funding would be. So what is it that the employer would need in such a process? And how can we meet those needs to the advantage of the union in any of those negotiations? So if the union does agree to certain changes, can the employer and the union then approach the government to get some regulatory changes that would reduce the pressure on the employer to make those solvency payments? And that would then avoid more significant changes to the plan being imposed on the pension plan members. So the union needs to really think creatively and be prepared to consider all of its options and allow the union to best understand what is most important to the plan members. And can those pension plan discussions lead to other discussions? Well, we certainly believe that they can. We've seen it happen in with other plans. That was the approach that was undertaken with Air Canada. And based on our experience in the Air Canada situation, they then went to the government along with Air Canada and received some of an additional time frame within which to make their solvency payments. They were extended for 10 years to make solvency deficit payments as opposed to the current 5-year regulations. At Canadian Press as well, the government provided solvency relief there. And in Ontario, in the Ontario public sector pension plans, we've seen similar things happen. So at Air Canada, the defined benefit pension plan was preserved. It was maintained with very good early retirement benefits. And in their last round of negotiations, they established a union-controlled multi-employer plan for new hires. but it's still a defined benefit plan and not the defined contribution plan or a hybrid of defined contribution, defined benefit plan that the corporation had talked to us about during the last round of negotiations. So, and those negotiations also ensured that Air Canada survived. Because what is facing Canada Post is, as of June of next year, they will be required to make cash payments of $100 million a month. And the Canada Post just released its third quarter report. It just came out today. And they don't have $100 million a month to pay. In fact, they're showing in the quarter a deficit of it was $183 million deficit for the third quarter. At the Canadian Press, the negotiations preserved the defined benefit pension plan, and it also ensured that Canadian Press continued on. In the Ontario public sector, there were some contribution freezes that were agreed to, but benefits were preserved, and the pension plan was extended to some new members. There was also the creation of a new pension plan for new members, but again, a defined benefit pension plan as opposed to defined contribution. So in these cases, the federal, both at the federal and the provincial level, it was the governments that agreed to regulatory changes that helped preserve the plan and allowed them to move forward. Now, in each of those cases, however, there also were some changes to benefits, and that's where obviously it most affects the current members of the plan. However, if Canada Post is allowed to fail because of their inability to meet their pension plan payments, it will be the federal government, the owner of Canada Post, that will decide what happens not only with the restructuring of the corporation, but what happens in respect of the pension plan overall, including the payments to current retirees. And we don't believe it's in the best interest of anyone to leave that entirely in the hands of the federal government. We need to make sure that there isn't an imposed outcome from the government. However, because it would be much better if there was a jointly agreed to solution. We can look to the situation that faced the Nortel employees or the retirees of Nortel when Nortel went bankrupt. And while there were court cases that went on and so on, ultimately the employees lost in that situation. So does CUPW have a legal basis in order to negotiate changes to the plan that will preserve the plan, as well as force the corporation to implement the changes that are required to protect the plan for the future? Well, we believe that there are some legal provisions. First of all, Canada Post has bargained with us on certain aspects of the plan. So the pension plan may therefore be protected by the collective agreement. That's not a foregone conclusion. It's what we believe, and it's the advice we've received from our legal counsel. However, whenever you put something in the hands of a third party, it becomes very, very difficult. Canada Post, another legal basis is that Canada Post is an agent of the Crown. And we believe the federal government has some fiduciary duties with respect to the pension plan members. Now, what's the content or the context of those and the extent of the duties? That's very hard to define. These duties probably include an obligation to give notice of potential changes and then enter into discussions around those changes. And there's a a BC Supreme Court decision around the BC Health Services that there most likely is an obligation to at least negotiate the changes that may be required in order to bring the plan back to a solvency or a solvent basis. Up to now, or since the solvency deficit first arrived on the scene, Canada Post has been meeting its legal obligations to make solvency payments, but not through cash. They did in 2010 make a $707 million solvency payment. But since 2010, through 2011 and 2012, they've been relying on a letter of credit from the government. Now, the government has, and while we call it a letter of credit, and Canada Post refers to it as a letter of credit, it isn't the same as a letter of credit that would be given by a bank to a private company. It really is just the government guaranteeing payment of the money that's under that letter of credit so there's that government guarantee. So from 2010 to 2012, the solvency payments have just been drawing on that letter of credit to the point of to the tune of about $1.3 billion. So right now, in respect of their solvency payments, or at the end of 2012, the solvency payments of $2 billion have been made, but they're still facing a $5.9 billion solvency deficit. The letter of credit will run out sometime in May or June, and there will be no more money available to the corporation under that letter of credit. And it's not just the federal government that's limiting that, it's also the pension regulations. The pension regulations that were brought in to allow companies, including Canada Post, to use a letter of credit to make their solvency payments, they put a limit of 15% of the plan assets. Could be, you could have that much of a letter of credit, and that's in May or June is when Canada Post will reach that 15% of the plan assets under the letter of credit. So that's when the corporation will have to face the music of $100 million cash per month, and we're not certain that, we know that Canada Post doesn't have that sort of money, and we don't know right now what the corporation is going to do when they hit that wall. We've started some talks with them, and we've had 3 meetings. At the first meeting, we essentially said, or asked them, are you willing to talk to us? And it took them a while to get back to us to say, okay, yes, we will talk to you, but what is it that you want? And we said, we're not going to make any proposals around changes to the pension plan until Canada Post lays out in a fully transparent manner what their plans are, their operational plans are going forward. You know, how far is postal transformation going to reduce the workforce? Will we end up with only 3 or 4 sorting plants across the country servicing all of Canada? That type of information. And that's what we put to them at the second meeting. And their response initially was, well, we have no operating plan. And what they were actually saying is their operating plan hasn't been approved by the government because their operating plan includes a deficit in each of the 5 years of the plan. And the government will not approve a deficit operating plan for the corporation. So at the last meeting, or the third meeting that we had with them, we did get the corporation to agree to allow our actuaries, we have engaged actuaries, to be able to speak directly with the actuaries that Canada Post uses to do the evaluation of the pension plan. And Canada Post has agreed that those actuaries can speak to each other on a actuary-to-actuary basis without the interference of labor relations. There will be no representative of Canada Post at those meetings. And so we will, through our actuaries, get the factual information in respect of the evaluations of the Canada Post pension plan and whether or not the assumptions that have been made in arriving at the actuarial evaluations are valid assumptions or are assumptions that perhaps are out to lunch. Our initial, or the information that we've received through the Pension Advisory Council over the last 13 years has been that the actuarial work that's been done has been very unbiased, so that there is a high level of, or a high degree of confidence in the actuarial reports that have been produced. So, but we will get confirmation of that through this upcoming meeting. So the Canada Post pension plan that started in October 2000 with a transfer from the public service superannuation of about just over $4 billion has now grown to be $17 billion. There's $17 billion in market value assets. As of the last valuation, that was June 28th, 2012, and it was it was the evaluation is as of December 31st, 2012, but it was filed with the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions on June 28, 2013, shows that there's a going concern surplus of just over $81 to $82 million and the solvency deficit of $5.9 billion. Some individuals have been extremely critical of the contribution holiday that Canada Post took in 2007 going into 2008. And I think it's a disservice to both Canada Post and to the members of the pension plan to say that that is the reason that the corporation or the pension plan is in the situation that it's in right now. Starting in 2003, the corporation did make special payments into the plan over and above their regular contributions in order to deal with solvency deficits. And they made solvency payments to the tune of about $716 million. And in 2007, 2008, when the plan was in a surplus, they didn't make payments in order to recover some of those special payments that they had made. And the recovery was only $373 million. And Canada Post had the legal right to continue with its contribution holiday right to the end of 2008 when there would be a new evaluation made. But when they saw what happened with the markets, they terminated their contribution holiday 2 months early. In October of 2008 is when they terminated their contribution holiday and started making contributions again, because they saw that they were headed for a solvency deficit. Now, in 2009, the deficit, or by December 31st, 2009, the deficit was reported at $2 billion. But that too was a little bit, that was an underreporting of what the solvency deficit actually was, because what the actuaries were employing was something called asset smoothing, where they if you've got peaks and valleys of the values of your assets, instead of just relying on the very top peak or the lowest valley, they will smooth those numbers across a 5-year period. Well, that's good at times when perhaps you're headed for surplus, and your asset smoothing will actually bring your surplus down. But what happens at the end when you hit a huge valley, like we did in 2008, was the previous year's surpluses actually brought that valley up a little bit, which would then give a false conception of what the actual deficit was. But the valuation at that time, though, was $2 billion, and as I said, right now, today, the solvency deficit is $5.9 billion, and the corporation needs to take action in order to fix that. The federal government could provide relief. The corporation has, on its own, asked for some solvency deficit relief. And the government to date has said no. We've only seen the government provide relief to plans where the two parties, the union and the plan sponsor or the employer, have gone together with a proposal to fix the problem. And we anticipate, or we're believing that the government is waiting for that type of action before they will provide relief. So I know I've used a lot of technical terms about solvency and going concern and so on, and thrown out a lot of numbers here. I'm sure you have questions about, okay, what happens if, or are the pension benefits of the current retirees fully protected? And I would like to say absolutely, and there will be no change. And I would, and that's the position that we would take and I think that pensioners should take that position if there ends up being unilateral changes, even by the federal government or by the corporation. Pensioners should take that position and take on the fight legally against the corporation or the government. But we all know what happens with legal battles. They get protracted. In fact, we can see the pay equity dispute that Canada Post was ordered years ago to pay up pay equity, and they're just making those payments now. And most of the delays there were because of the legal challenges and the legal fights that went on. So and more often than not, the end result of a legal battle is not to bring someone whole. You always end up with some loss at the end of it. So we believe that it's best to ameliorate the damage by having discussions and perhaps coming up with a plan that preserves the best parts of the pension plan, talking to the government jointly with Canada Post to get the solvency relief that Canada Post desperately needs by June of next year. And with that, I will open up the floor to questions and